sat down for a year every night and typed up about 500 cases. It was pretty hard. And how will you
Yeah.
really do the cases? And then people were lining up, and it was almost done at this one CRNA convention I was at. I thought, man, I might be onto something. And then my wife says, why don't you combine your 5 apps together into one app? Because this one has this one, this person doesn't know about that one. So I combined them all, and I didn't know what to name it. She said, name it Mega App. Put all 5 together, and then it kind of took off.
Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. Our guest today is Matt Vargo, a CRNA who currently works in Charlotte, North Carolina. And while working at Spartanburg Regional Medical Center in South Carolina, he was encouraged by a physician colleague to convert hundreds of pages of anesthesia drips, drugs, and anesthesia case tip notes on his BlackBerry into an anesthesia app. Now, at that time, mobile apps and iPhones were pretty primitive. So while Matt was initially hesitant, his persistence was actually rewarded. Within the first 4 years, Vargo Anesthesia had 5 of the top 8 selling anesthesia apps sold by Apple. And after 7 years of dedication and work, Vargo Anesthesia has become the primary leader in anesthesia mobile apps with the top 2 medical apps. So Matt, welcome to the show today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, prior to this, we were talking a little bit about some of our own histories. My father being in the military for 20 years, and your father being in the military. So I'm kind of interested in delving a little bit more into that. Can you tell me about some of those childhood influences that have maybe had an effect on you?
Yeah, I had a unique childhood. We traveled everywhere. I'm sure you know about that. And I mean, every 2 or 3 years, Hawaii, California, twice, Quantico, Virginia, Charleston. I mean, so many places. You just get used to traveling. You meet a lot of people. I mean, we even had like 2 pet alligators when I was. Yeah, my dad brought home 2 alligators back then when it was legal. My mom wasn't happy.
I'm
I
a
was a
fan of the
cool.
Florida Gators myself. I'm a graduate of University of Florida, but I don't go so far as to try to own them.
Yeah, I think I was in first grade, and we were the coolest kids on the block while we had them. After they died, nobody cared anymore. We weren't that cool. But yeah, I had a lot of unique friends too. I mean, you know how it is when you travel everywhere. And in one area I lived in, I'm not gonna say where it was. It was pretty rough. You hung out with the tough guys, and that's what you did for survival. Then I moved to a small town in Erie, Pennsylvania. Thank God my dad retired, because I probably would have amounted to nothing if I would have stayed in that area where I lived. I'm not gonna say where it was, but so I started hanging out with some tough guys just in survival. But it was a small, peaceful town. I didn't have to. So one guy, you hear that term, show me your friends and I'll show you your future,
Yeah.
or you become who your friends are. I mean, that is so important because I got really lucky. I had 2 close friends in high school who I hung out with them because they were just tough dudes. No one messed with them, but I didn't realize they were geniuses and they would succeed, and they real rubbed off. So I had a guy named Mark Long. He was in mixed martial arts. I mean, he was a tough dude. But at the same time, he was super intelligent, straight A's, and he went to Carnegie Mellon and got his MBA after engineering. Now he trades stocks like $1 million or so a day as a game. Last I heard. I'm like,
Wow.
gee, yeah, But that kind of, because I thought, wow, maybe there's something to being smart and getting good grades. Then on the flip side, I had this other friend. He was a big dude. No one messed with him, but he was quiet. Never got in fights because no one would dare want to fight this guy. He was just a quiet kid. Never cared about school, but he had the most common sense I've ever seen. He can fix anything. His dad was a race car driver. This kid could rip apart cars. I mean, anytime we came across an obstacle, he'd go, "Oh, yeah, just do this and that." And it was done. Like my dad was a Naval Academy grad. He's graduated valedictorian when he was 15. He skipped 2 grades. He always got straight A's. I think the Naval Academy realized he was too young when he got accepted at 16. So he had to go to college for 2 years, then went to the academy. So he taught us like academics and everything, but he just didn't have the common sense. And none of us could build a birdhouse, barely change a tire. But this furlough guy was, I mean, he's unbelievable. And long story short, he started out in tool and dies when he graduated, showed me his little shop when came back from college. And he was working on some kind of part of a missile silo from the government or something. They assigned contractor for just little parts of a weapon or whatever. He was doing that. It's like, geez. And then I went back after I think it was college high school reunion. He didn't want any part of it. He's just laid back, quiet. He's got a huge tool and die, but he has race cars, trucks that he transports. He made it. He's super successful, does what he wants. And his daughter, I remember talking to his daughter. He has 3 beautiful little girls at that time, way back. And one became a CRNA named Marcy Furlow. Shout out to her. She's in New Mexico. I remember talking about CRNA to her. I never, she stuck to it, became a CRNA. So good for her.
Cool.
Yeah.
Funny how things like that can come around.
Yeah. I remember one time also I was at a mixed martial arts display at our high school. And there was this guy, he was, doing a big demonstration. They had a little tournament there. And we were like, I think I was a junior or senior. And the guy said he wanted to go to the Olympics, wanted to do this or that. And I thought, poor guy, there's just not much money in martial arts. It turns out it was Billy Blanks. Remember Tybo? Yeah, he was so cool. He wanted us to come down to his karate place in downtown Erie. And I'd be the only white guy in his class. I don't think so, man. I get my ass whooped every day. But I remember going to the Blockbuster way back, and I see all these videos. I was like, my God, that's him.
Man, small world. Such a small world.
He stuck with it. Started out from nothing.
Yeah.
Super charismatic guy. Now he's top of the world.
So you talk about being influenced by the people that you were around. What were those influences that they really provided for you? What was it you learned from them that you weren't going to get elsewhere?
Hard work, to just stick to it.
Yeah.
Like Mark Long. I remember I took a physics test and I was in the respiratory, and I didn't do well because I had to pull an all-nighter, and someone gave me this, I thought it was a caffeine pill. So I pulled an all-nighter with this pill, and I went in that test at 8:00 in the morning. I knew every question, everything, and I did terrible on it because the guy changed the questions, the professor. Mm-hmm. If I had everything memorized, I remember I was all bummed, and I called Mark Long rather than my parents. And he said, "Hang in there, man. You can do it. I know you." And gave me a lot of confidence. And Dennis Furlow taught me about common sense, lay low. He was a quiet kid, very athletic. He was, I think he was a state champ in javelin. He was strong as an ox, and just hard work and persistence.
Yeah. Well, and that's definitely something, from everything that we've talked about, that's something that you have really exemplified throughout your anesthesia career so far. So that's great.
I learned that, I've always been humble because I was never as sharp as a lot of people. There's so much intelligence out there. I work with CRNAs who can run circles around. And I know that. I let them know that, and you suck up their knowledge. Why get mad at them? Tell me this, tell me that. And they help you. You can't be cocky.
Yeah. No,
I could be cocky if I tried in this profession. There's just so much out there.
No, I agree with you. That was all, when I got started as a student, it was pretty clear early on, okay, well, these are the students that are, at the top of the class. And then these are the ones that are kind of in the middle, and so you figure out real quick, if you've got something that you got a question about, who to ask. And there's no problem with leaning on people, for that.
Yeah, it's like when I was in high school, when I moved to that one high school, survival, so you hang out with the toughest guy. They just have to be brilliant, that kind of influenced me. But yeah, like you said, you hang around, who you hang out with is what you're going to become.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the five people you're surrounding yourself with the most. Those are the people who have the most influence on you. And so I completely subscribe to that. Let's kind of dive in to your anesthesia career and how that led you to getting into the mobile app world.
Oh, okay. So I was fortunate when I worked in Chattanooga. I worked at a really good group. They took care of us. They gave us like 6 or 8 weeks. The pay wasn't the best, but that's how private groups are. And so I started doing some traveling, and I realized, having 3 daughters, 3 kids, and my wife stayed at home by her choice to raise the kids. I needed more money. So I started traveling on the side. I noticed North Carolina was wide open. So I kind of came down here, and my wife decided to stay back with the kids because Charlotte was growing so fast. So I was down here by myself for a while, and I'd go back and forth. And I started doing some locums in Spartanburg, South Carolina. It was a huge hospital. I mean, it's kind of hard to work, kind of like Winston-Salem was at Wake
Hmm.
or Baptist.
Yeah.
And I had this BlackBerry that had like 700 pages of notes in it, and I was looking something up. I was with an anesthesiologist. You wanted to know what a drip, what certain drip was. You didn't have it memorized. So I got it right here. I pulled it up. She goes, "Oh my God, where did you get that?" I said, "Oh, it's just notes."
So
She goes, "Look at that."
you yourself had 700 pages of notes.
Yeah, it was almost like a self-made app within a BlackBerry because you could pick categories.
Holy smokes,
I had
man. That's
drips.
amazing.
You can't memorize everything.
No, you
It's
can't.
ability. And then she says, "Why don't you make an app?" I said, "What's an app?" And the iPhone just came out. And then
Hmm.
she showed me one. There was like 2 anesthesia apps that were existed. They weren't very user friendly. And so I'm getting an iPhone, and she finally talked me into it. And the first one I looked at was a drip app, and it was written by an anesthesiologist, I think it was, or maybe a pharmacist. It was ridiculous. Like it was so unuser friendly. You had to type in the solvent, the solute, the weight, what you wanted. It was very cumbersome. I thought, why
Hmm.
doesn't someone just list the drugs that we use and do all the calculations and don't use the database? It might be harder to do, but it's easier to use.
Hmm.
So I did a drip app, and you just pick the weight, you pick the strength, boom, you got your tables, 2 seconds. And then there was a pediatric app that was out there. I worked on that for a while, and there was a PD. It's called PD Safe, and it was okay, but it had like a nice table you can click, but it was very limited. And I thought, someone quadrupled that and put cases on it and made it user friendly. That would be
Hmm.
great too. But when I started out, I mean, I wasn't winning. I mean, there was no marketing at the social media then. I wasn't spending any money on it. I think it took me extra time to even create the apps because there are very little programmers that even wrote apps. And you had to go to another country. I wouldn't give up. I thought it's got to be a way. It's got to be a way. And it took like extra long to initiate the process. And once I created the pathway and got the system down, it's been a lot less cumbersome. And I can create an app now. I got the system and everything's going easy. But at first, it was failing. I mean, I'd go to a seminar and this sRNA or CRNA had this app. I didn't know about this app. I had 4 or 5 apps.
Hmm.
And then when I came up with case tips, that was a ticket because I'd get these students come with these care plans with ridiculous care plans, how to do these procedures. I said, well, where did you learn that? And it was from a certain book. I thought, oh, that's not right. So I sat down for a year every night and typed up about 500 cases. It was pretty hard. And how you
Yeah.
really do the cases. And then people were lining up, and it was almost done at this one CRNA convention I was at. I thought, man, I might be onto something. And then my wife says, why don't you combine your 5 apps together into one app? Because this one has this one, this person doesn't know about that one. So I combined them all, and I didn't know what to name it. She said, name it Mega App, put all 5 together, and then it kind of took off.
Hmm.
And then now I've just been adding app after app. And I have like 22 apps. Some I just took down. They're just not worth, continuing, maintaining.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you casually mention, "Oh yeah, I just have 22." It's
Yeah,
only
a lot of
22,
work.
Well, that's it. I mean, this stuff obviously has been a lot of labor for you. You know, I guess I'm wondering, I mean, you had 700 pages of notes. That obviously took a ton of time, and then it's taken a lot of time to get going. What does that time process look like back then, and what does it look like now?
Well, back then, the time process was the same. But the process to create the app with programmers was probably twice as long because the accessibility was minimal. Now I have 2 private programmers. One's in Morocco, one's in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Mhm.
I've got the system now, and one of the hardest thing is all the retrieval of information, like this
Hmm.
coexisting app. You have to have the most recent information. So I spend like over 1,000 or so just on subscriptions. Up to date, unbound medicine. I buy medical school notes. I buy
Yeah.
and it's just and I try to simplify. Like I noticed in the textbook world, especially when I was taking biology and chemistry in high school, or when I was in the CRNA school, you'll read something and they make it like so difficult to understand sometimes. Maybe it's the way it's written, and then you look at
Hmm.
another resource and go, "Oh, I see. Why didn't they just explain it like that?" So I noticed that I look at all these textbooks and with diseases and everything, and it's just like they use the biggest words they can. I thought, why didn't someone just simplify from these resources that we all use
Hmm.
anyways and transfer it to an app and just make it super user friendly and you can retrieve the information.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing it faster, but the time consumption is still terrible. It's too
Yeah.
time.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you've definitely got a passion for learning. I mean, you have to be able to go through that much material, that many case studies and ways of doing things. What's the feedback that you've gotten, not just from users, but from people like having their own way of doing cases? How do you take that kind of feedback into account when you're creating your app?
Like there was times like I would ask anesthesiologists or people who do these cases, and they all do it different. So
Hmm.
sometimes I'll write some anesthesia providers do it this way, and so there's more than one way. People do eyeballs different. People do
Hmm.
tonsillectomies different. And if you look at the file, I have one section about how others do tonsillectomies, and I have at least 10 or 15 people's their different cocktails they use.
Hmm.
So it gives someone a perspective of how others do it rather than just one from the book.
Nice.
That helps a lot.
Nice. Yeah. So what were your initial costs with getting this whole thing started?
Initially, I probably lost a few thousand in programming about 10 years ago, just getting ripped off. They
Okay.
couldn't finish. You have a guy in India who's taking your money, and turns out he doesn't do a good job. You can't sue them; they're over there. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I had one guy I had to buy my own source codes from. In America, when you have a programmer, they develop an app for you, you give me information. That's your source code. It's kind of like the that you can use it to transfer to another programmer, and I had to buy them off him when they were mine. But now I yeah, it's
Gotta
terrible.
love that. Gotta love that.
Ripped off a lot in the beginning,
Oh man.
when you're taking a pathway no one's ever done, I mean, you're gonna have this trial and error.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, what would you do differently now? I mean, what are some changes you would make to the way that you did things back then, if you were getting started yourself now?
I probably would have used a professional editor because my writing skills growing up in Hawaii and California. I didn't never had to write. I think the biggest paper I wrote in high school was 2 pages on Roberto Clemente. And then college was like nothing. And then all of a sudden you got to write. I'm writing like a 4,000 page coexisting. So now I have a guy named James Carroll, CRNA. He's retired,
Mhm.
like a journalism degree or something. He just corrects everything. And
Okay.
I use certain anesthesiologists and friends I know that, and I said, I use them as resources. Like, how do you do this? What happens? Because a lot of times the book is unrealistic. They
Mhm.
tell you one thing, but people in reality do this. And I think I remember doing that. I don't pre-op a lot of patients like the ologists or solo CNAs do. And so I would reach out to them and they say, no, no, this is what I do. And then it
Yeah.
just it's a lot easier. I would have
Okay.
done that to begin with, had an editor, of course, programmers different.
Yeah. So that's primarily the bulk of your team. Obviously, you have yourself, you've got the editor, you've got the programmer. Who else is in your team? Do you have any marketing folks in your team, or is that
My
just
wife
you?
does it all. Like in the beginning, I mean, when it started getting popular, it was over my head. I had an accountant. I don't know what she was doing, but I was getting IRS letters all the time,
Yeah.
50, 70 emails a day. Sometimes usually 10 to 20. Then it started getting a lot more questions. No marketing. So she got
Mhm.
involved and took over all that. She took care of the accounting. We have a accounting firm now. She does Instagram. I mean,
Mhm.
she turned that around. We're up to about 9,000 followers now. I had to
Okay.
stop using Facebook because Facebook limits you at 5,000 friends if it's a personal account. And she does it all. Now we're getting like bombarded. I mean, we just found out we're number one in some country called Gambia. I think They must have 4 phones there, you know?
Yeah, hey, you know?
She's answering emails from Pakistan lately, and it's kind of cool how networking that she's created, and you know, and this coexisting app is now being sold to all these different niches that I want to cross over: nurse
Mhm.
practitioner, med students, anesthesia residents, ologists, PAs,
Yeah,
ICU nurses,
yeah.
because I wanted to cross the niche. I thought, you know, it'd be nice when I was an ICU nurse to be able to have without paying $100 something a month subscription to these annual fees, and have it explained easily. So if my patient has this disease, I can look it up and I get the details of how they treat it, the medications, symptoms, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the whole thing about this is that you saw a need. You're finding out what people want to know about based on your own experiences. I mean, obviously, that breadth of experience from being a respiratory therapist, a neonatal nurse, into the anesthesia world, you've marched in multiple shoes and seen so many different things. So you know what those people are looking for because you were there. And I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing thing.
And one thing I've really learned by reading all these med school notes, all these, you know, I'm now adding procedures that aren't in books yet. The coexisting disease was a wake up call, but how little we know. I mean, a
Hmm.
lot of us don't know what we don't know. You know, I'm not putting down on my profession or any other profession, but there's so much material out there that we know very little.
Yeah.
You know, when I started pulmonary hypertension in this section with the coexisting app, I thought it'd be 1 or 2 files. It turned out to be 20. It's over like 100 something pages.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah.
find out through renal. I don't know if you remember. I mean, I used to see these patients crumping, these renal patients with they just crump and coat a lot of them with the 80 graph revisions. And with pulmonary hypertension, I found, you know, some digging all the details that group 5 pulmonary hypertension by the WHO, it's multifactorial. One of it is chronic renal disease. So I started thinking, you know what? They treat pulmonary hypertension with vasopressin. If it's a crisis, if it's group 5 or group 1 or group 3, but not group 2, maybe it's group 2. Group 2 is left heart failure. You don't want to give a pulmonary vasodilator, but I bring vasopressin into a renal case. And if they start crumping it, I don't, you know, don't continue to kneel. You turn it off and give vasopressin. They turn around almost every time.
Huh.
That's a speculation that it's the group 5. Up to 50% of renal failure patients that are chronic with an AV graft get group 5 pulmonary hypertension. I mean, there's so
So,
much we don't know, you know,
oh
and
yeah. Well, and
easy.
how do you keep it all straight? I mean, that's the thing. If you're in a regular OR where you can be going from, a cardiac case to, a big belly case or whatever. I mean, you're
Yeah,
you're
baby,
dealing with or a
yeah.
baby, yeah, you're dealing with babies and OB and all kinds of things that, yeah, I think that's where some of the
Accessibility.
specialization, it can be very useful if you are highly specialized, but it can also be limiting as an anesthesia provider too. So
Yeah. I
what
mean,
is
accessibility
the
is
perfect
everything.
mix? I don't know.
Yeah, I just add it all. The only thing I don't have on the app is blocks because there's a block buddy app that does that and everybody CRNAs. But accessibility and references is everything. I mean, if you
Mhm.
don't, you know, when you have an app, you don't need Wi-Fi. Once it's loaded, it's loaded.
Yeah.
And if you create a system where someone's like in this big mixture, you go from an adult to a baby, like a two
Mhm.
kilogram, you don't know the dosage of all, everything's weight based. So I made a system that they can just find it in seconds without even going on the internet, all the doses.
Sure.
You go into
Sure.
a case like a TIPS procedure with liver. I don't know what that is, you know, and you look it up real quick. Oh, that's what you do. That's it. So
Yeah.
I just combined a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like the coexisting is probably 4,400 pages by now. I'm adding a 300 page congenital heart defect app to it. And I've been working that for 2 years because everyone makes it so difficult to understand peds hearts.
Mhm.
So I reached out to some peds CRNAs doing nothing but hearts, fewologists, and for the last 2 years, I'm covering. Got a graphics person. I'm going to be adding. I'm simplifying it basically. Two or
Mhm.
300 pages of congenital heart defects, not only in peds, but what they don't talk about is adults and pregnancy. Like, you know, you have an adult now who got tetralogy flow in their kids. What do you do when they're pregnant? What do you do when they're
Yeah.
adult for non-cardiac surgery? And I had to, there's very little material on it. So I downloaded or I actually watched the DeBakey Heart, Texas Heart Institute symposium of them talking about this and took a lot of notes. So I'm just making it bigger and bigger. Like
Mhm.
someone said, like the reason Honda did so well, versus America, because America kept coming out with new models, the Ford Taurus, this and that.
Hmm.
Honda stuck with the Civic and the Accord, and they just kept making them better and better and better and better, the same model. So I try and use that, just stick to the same app and just build it, make it better, build it, make it better, and just add on to it.
No, that makes complete sense. So, what would your advice be for somebody looking to get into the mobile app world? I mean, not necessarily in the anesthesia world, but for anything. I mean, cooking apps or whatever. What would
Yeah,
your advice be?
what I usually do, I give them some shortcuts that I didn't get to take. Like I've been contacted by a few people, and I'll give them some programmers, and I'll give them advice what they do. I've been contacted by someone in Texas. I got contacted. I mean, I just give them, do it this way, do it that way, and don't give up. And if it's anesthesia or science, it's going to take a lot of literature. It's going to take a lot of time, because if
Yeah.
it's that simple to write, it's that small, it could be duplicated and just be wiped out.
All right. Well, Matt, another question I had for you was, you've got these rankings in apps, and I'm just now getting into the podcast world where we have rankings ourselves and stuff like that. And you want to be in the new and noteworthy or whatever. I'm new to this. How do the rankings work for you? How has that shaped what you're doing?
Well, they have there's something called App Annie, or you see the Apple rankings of all the iOS and Droid apps. And I learned out of there's 73,000 medical apps in America.
73,000.
Yes, and they ranked me one and number two of top grossing. So I got very blessed and fortunate. And I think there's one out of 1.8 million at one time. The coexisting disease went to 277 out of 1.8 million. That's all up there with the games. Of course, it was temporary. And I'm blessed. I mean, I couldn't even be number one in my class. I guess it's just because it's so much volume, and I underprice a lot of people.
Yeah. So one of the things I do like to talk about here is, like, you're creating income from this app. I have absolutely zero concept of the financial aspect of creating an app and benefiting financially from it. Can you walk us through a little bit of that? How long did it take to find some profit in that? And then how has that snowballed to
And when I
now?
first started out, it was like $200 a month. It was just dragging. I never really lost money in the beginning because you kind of make it back. If you have like some programmers will charge you, they want to charge you $25,000 to create an app. And one of my apps, I had a
Oh
15-year-old
boy.
kid out of Spartanburg High School. His father was a surgeon, and he created, I think it was a drips app for $150. And then you're like, yeah, it's amazing. But you can really get ripped off. And so Apple used to charge 30% commission up to last year. Now they're down to 15%. There's like 1.8 million apps, only 0.2 of them make over $1 million a year. A lot of those are games and stuff. And so they cut the commission from anyone who doesn't make $1 million a year down to 15%. So I've just pretty much last year or this year doubled my income
Okay.
because I went from 30 to 15. And I could have retired probably 4 years ago,
Okay.
where I'm making a lot more than as an anesthesia provider, but I just kept working full time and,
Yeah.
kids and uncertainty. So now that the coexisting just even doubled everything, and now it's even bigger because it's going to different niches.
Yeah.
It's doing pretty well. But you never want to give up because there's always competition out there. And the good thing about the app is it takes so long to write. Like, for example, to write an anesthesia app, you have to be an anesthesia provider.
Hmm.
You have to know what's going on. So that narrows it down right there. And then if it takes you 3 years or 2 years to write a big app, that even narrows it like 100%. How many people do you know, like, you take an anesthesiologist, they get out of residency, they do the fellow or what they do, and they're finally ready to start a family. Their wife is not going to let them sit down for 10 hours a day
Hmm.
on every off day for 3 years when they have kids to raise.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. Take a loser like me. I used to say, well, I've got no future. I'll do it. That's $3. I was tired of being poor. So I just outworked everyone. And you can't
Yeah.
just come in. Like, you see, some businesses might take 3 days to create.
Mhm.
How long does it take to open up? Nothing against them, but a ketamine clinic or a vapor store or something, and it could be copied just like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Something that takes that long of a time. And I mean, I took 3 years to do coexisting, cost me thousands because I use the graphics and everything. But I didn't know if he was even going to sell. So who wants to take a 3-year risk?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I would say now you've proven that the market exists for certain things, but you were really on the cutting edge of that, and that's I think what gives your app so much credence, and so much value is that you were there from the get go,
Yeah,
and you've been one of the more consistent apps out there, and so I think that's a powerful thing to be a first mover in a market. And it sounds like you're reaping some of those benefits now. What do the next few years look like for you? What's going on with the mobile apps, and what's going on with you personally? Where are you looking to go? What are you looking to do?
well, I guess I've been fortunate. I mean, I've worked awful lot of hours, the last so many years. Now the two apps, went to one and two of all medical apps, and I've pretty much done more than I ever thought I would. So I'm going to start spending time with family, and I'll
Mhm.
still work on the apps, just tone it down. And I'm going to retire. Like my late 50s here. We're moving to Chattanooga, and I remember when I was a respiratory therapist in Pittsburgh. I used to like give breathing treatments to these people dying of lung cancer, and I'd sit down and talk with them a lot. And I remember this one architect. He had like 6 offices, multi-millionaire. He says he always wanted to be rich, blah blah blah. And he says, "Let me give you some advice, son." And I never forgot this. He says, "My wife left me. My kids don't talk to me. I just spent every day at the office, and money came first." And he said, "You can replace lost money, but you can't replace lost time." And I never
Absolutely.
forgot that. And now, I look about how much I've missed. I'll go on Facebook and I see all these young CRNAs, they're making 6 digits. They're going to Cancun. They're going to Turks and Caicos. They're living it up. I mean, they're enjoying life, and, find fault with that. So I think I'm going to tone it down, spend time with grandkids. We're going to retire in Chattanooga. We're building up on a mountain, and that'll be done about a year or two. And I'm going to start taking care of my health. I've gained 20, 30 pounds sitting all day writing apps, and I'm starting to feel it. So why, and you know how it is. You're in the hospital. You're seeing people. You're having patients dying your age and younger. And thinking, how much time do I really have? Maybe I should really appreciate, what I have right now and enjoy it while I can. I think I told you earlier, I have a little brother who almost died of cancer, and that really woke me up. And I'm going to be donating. It might be me. We're getting some tissue matching, but I'll probably be the one that donates a kidney.
Oh, wow. My
I
own
mean,
mother's on end stage, she's got end stage renal disease, and so that's something that for me hits very close to home. I can't donate a kidney because I had kidney disease when I was 3 or 4 years old, and so,
mhm.
yeah, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, I mean, I see what he has to go through being on dialysis, and yeah, we see dialysis patients at the hospital. It's sad.
Mhm.
That's a rough thing to go through. And if I could donate a kidney, I mean, I've lived a good life. I'm not gonna, not that I'm gonna die from it, but you know, uh, I've achieved a lot more than I thought I'd ever achieve, and it's time to give back.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Those are some really wise words. And I'm personally living some of that right now. I don't I I don't waste time with things that don't matter to me in my life anymore. And that's
Mhm.
something, I mean, I'm fortunate that I learned it at this age, and I'm able to take the time for my family now. Cause I got to thinking about my kids, they're all elementary school age right now. And that's great if I work my tail off and I make all this money and I can retire, in my mid 50s. But by then they're all out of the house. So then what did I do all that for? I've got all this free time, and but I missed all this time with my kids. So
Yeah,
kudos to you for finding that out about yourself. And there's a saying, that just comes back to me that rich people have a lot of money, wealthy people have a lot of time.
that's true.
And so
Yeah, I was lucky when I was a respiratory therapist and a neonatal nurse. My wife was a nurse. We worked opposite shifts, night shift. We really couldn't afford a nanny or daycare. So I would spend all day with the kids growing up. I mean, up to so many years.
Hmm.
It was nice. I mean, change your diapers. I take them all out. We'd go all, and it was one on one, or
Yeah.
one on three actually, until a time came when I went to graduate school.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember those days, and I'm glad they did. But you're right. I mean, you're doing a good thing. You're spending a lot of time with your kids.
Yeah. It's been an adventure so far. So, and it's fun to see them growing up and to know that I'm an active part of that. So,
I think it was Robert Frost said like there was two roads that diverge in the wood, and
uh-huh.
I traveled the one with the
The
least
less
travel.
traveled.
Travel made all the
Yeah.
difference. And
Hmm.
if you take the hardest route, sometimes it's less likely to be duplicated or impinged on.
No, that's awesome, man. This is all. I've loved this podcast. I've really enjoyed, listening to your advice and basically your history of how you built this mega app. And we're going to link to all of your information in our show notes and stuff. But I just want to thank you for being here today, and I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. I like what you're doing. You're helping a lot of people.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
I really enjoyed having Matt on the show, and I just love his story. With the Vargo Anesthesia apps, Matt provides a product that he himself wants to use, and he outworked others early on and consistently over many years. His persistence has certainly paid off. He makes much more than his CRNA salary from app sales, all while being able to create flexibility in his schedule as he pleases. He works now simply because he enjoys it, and he has the freedom to slow down as he sees fit. That's going to do it for us today. I hope you'll join me next time on the Plan B CRNA podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.